I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramblin' Man Podcast, episode number 62. This one is with Claudia Caballero, and we talk about her journey from Honduras to Knoxville. It's interesting hearing kind of the back and forth, her bouncing around, but you can hear more about that on the episode. If you'd like more information about Claudia, she doesn't have the biggest social media footprint, but you can follow along with the nonprofit organization that she runs called Centro Hispano. You can find more information about them at centrohispanotn.org, CENTROHISPANOTN.org. Our sponsor this week is Feral Giant. Feral Giant is a graphic design, illustration, and social media company. If it's creative or digital, they can suit all your needs. They're a collective of graphic designers, social media experts, photographers, web designers, coders, SEO experts. Like I said, if it's creative or digital, they've got you covered. You can find more information about them at feralgiant.com. Without much further ado, here's the episode. I'm going to start on that.
On that note, welcome.
Note, yeah. Beat a Saigon and Hooters, where I can't. I'm not that quick. It's too early in the morning for me. I can't bring that up. I actually went back and listened to our Why Knox to be able to take. I was like, I have forgotten everything, but I was like, I still need to treat this as different, so I do have notes.
I need you to send that one back. I don't even remember. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was.
I don't think I heard it. I hate listening to my voice anyway, so I probably won't hear this one either because I'm just like, oh my God.
You're originally from Honduras.
I am.
And were your parents born and raised Honduras?
My dad is Honduran.
Okay,
my mom is a dairy farmer from Southern Illinois, and she went to the Peace Corps in the 80s.
Okay.
And she started dating my dad, and then I was born.
Peace Corps. Wow. Okay. Southern Illinois to Honduras. How? I'm sure it's a culture shock, but it's also aren't both pretty big farming areas.
They are. She was actually working with farmers in the region of Honduras, where my dad's from. So,
okay.
He was working for the government's agricultural program.
Okay.
And she was working for the Peace Corps. So
wow.
They were both in a tiny town where we have a farm now, and they were both working there.
And from what I remember, they started a grocery store together?
Started a restaurant. We started a restaurant in 2003, 2002, because I'm the oldest of five, and we needed to go to college, and my dad's salary wasn't enough. And so my mom was like, well, why don't we try selling pizza on the weekends from my grandma's a back room in her house.
Wow.
We installed a little kitchen, and they were just pizzas to go Saturdays and Sundays, and we called it Weekends Pizza, and it's still going strong.
Weekends Pizza. Oh my God. Okay. And was there ever a thought this is still down in Honduras? Mm-hmm. Was there ever thought of moving closer to her family in Southern Illinois, or want to stay
for me
down? Or for them?
No. So when I was 5, we moved to the States, and we started out in Illinois, then we were in Missouri for a short time, and then we were in Nebraska for a couple of years.
Okay.
Kind of following a job for my dad. He's an agricultural engineer with a master's in irrigation from Japan, and so he had a lot of education and experience. And in the 90s, trying to find a job for a Latino, I think, in that work was a little bit of a challenge for them. So we were in the States for about 6 years.
Yeah.
And then he couldn't stand the cold and he couldn't stand the discrimination. And so he decided he needed to go back, and my mom decided we were going back too.
The cold was still number one. It was
Probably.
Illinois.
It wasn't Nebraska.
Oh,
it was
Nebraska.
definitely Illinois. It was definitely the weather. No, it's brutal. The cold weather is brutal, and I really believe there is something. There's something in our blood. There's something in it's really hard to adapt to colder weather, and I feel the same. I lived in Ohio for a couple of years, and it does something to you. So looking for warmer weather is really important, which is the reason we ended up in Knoxville with my partner as well.
Yeah. There must be some Wisconsin, even though we can't find any, because I wear shorts in the winter and I can't stand the heat. And I'm always dying in the summertime.
I will take any sweaty weather all the time. Hot and humid, like that's where I'm from. God. I will take it any day.
Whereas I'm bounding about in New York in shorts in December.
Gross.
In
no.
like 15 degrees.
No. I was just in Boston a week ago, and it was 70 degrees. It was really nice. They're like, you must have brought the good weather from Tennessee. And I was like, not really.
No.
It was like 40 degrees and raining and snowing here.
Yeah.
But
just flip-flopped. Well, even that, global warming's not real. It's totally not a thing.
It's interesting. Even folks, who aren't necessarily watching news and are in rural places in Honduras talk about the change in climate without having the research, without having someone who's quote unquote knows what they're talking about. Like they can't predict. My grandma's 94 and she talks about how things have changed with the climate and how she can't predict what season we're in Honduras. So it's interesting.
That's one word.
It's a lot has changed. When I was just in Honduras visiting her, and she now lives in Tegucigalpa, which is the capital.
Okay.
And so in Honduras, most of the time, like most places I ever lived, you only get water a couple of times a week. So you have tanks, and you fill those tanks and you use your water sparingly, right? Well, they're at the point where they get water every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, and you don't have the capacity in a tank to keep that much water. Yeah. And then when the water comes, it doesn't fill up the whole tank either. And so middle class people are still, somewhat okay, but folks that aren't in that economic, position or privilege are really, really suffering for water.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There's a nonprofit. I can't pull it. Their entire thing is just getting water to places like that. That I only found out through another artist, that he started selling prints and giving a portion of every print went to that charity.
Well, there's two things, right? It's one thing of, is there water and you just can't get to it? So do we rip pipes in? Or is it that just the water is running out in the region you're living in, right? And then you have to move somewhere else. It's funny when I lived in Texas, my dad came to visit from Honduras, and again, he's an agricultural engineer, he's a farmer, and he was like, he loved Texas, but he's like, there's not going to be water here soon. You can't stay here. And then we were like, when we were looking for places to move, we looked at Southwest. And he's like, nope, no water. And so when we moved to Tennessee, he's like, good. I know there's water in Tennessee. And I'm just like, how random is this? But farmers do, depend on water, and I find it interesting because I grew up on a farm, and for me, folks get sad about rain, or they get sad about, oh, my weekend is ruined. And for me, I'm always happy about rain. When it's in the right season, I'm always happy about rain, because it means growth. It means you don't have to water the crops or the gardens. And so.
Yeah, I think it's going to get up to like 68 today. 68, pouring rain, tornadoes in Nashville, and it's March 2nd.
We just need to adapt. We need to be resilient.
No, I need my cold. I'm ready for my have you ever heard of the blizzard of 93?
Oh, I've heard of it.
The legendary thing of 21 inches of snow within like a couple hours. Yeah. Oh, I would love that so much.
Were you here for it?
Oh yeah. They shut down the schools for, I think it was 2 full weeks when that happened.
Dang.
And it was...
Why? Because the snow wouldn't melt, or people were so shocked?
No, the snow wouldn't melt. Like, and it came so quick and it was so bad that my dad and uncle got into a 4-wheel truck and had to go look for my mom. And they said where 40 and 640 meet up. So they said 40 looked like an abandoned parking lot. And there were just cars left because they just couldn't get through the snow. So they tore out that way to try and find her. Hit a point where they couldn't go any further, had to jump the barrier to see if they could get to the other side where she would have been coming from. Couldn't find her.
My gosh.
Like this before cell phones.
Right
Kept
on.
driving around trying to find her. Finally found like a gas station, used a payphone, which is another funny thing to talk about in 2020. And it turned out she was at my other uncle's house, sitting by the fire, drinking hot toddies, because she had made it to his road and couldn't make it any further. So she just dumped her car by the side of the road and walked up to my uncle's house. And my uncle was like, she's pretty drunk, right?
I guess that's one way to weather the storm.
Yeah, she probably wouldn't like me. It was her and a friend of hers from work that it was nuts. It was actually real. Like, not like now where it snows 1/4 of an inch and everybody's like, oh my God, we're all going to die. Make milk sandwiches.
Yeah.
Okay, so your dad, so what took him all the way over, you said Japan, to get a degree? Well,
There was some government program that he applied to, and my mom was pregnant with my third sister at the time, and she told him, go. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. So he was there for a year. She had my sister, and he was still in Japan, and he came home, and she was like 3 months old or something. It was nuts, but he loved it. He loved the culture. He loved the food.
Oh yeah.
And so, he got a degree in irrigation or something. But
Okay.
it was one of those like exchange program that the governments do, and he got it.
Wow. Because I looked up factoids about Honduras. I actually have some stuff. I was amazed. It's not. I think it said 9 million people live in like that. I never. When I think about Central America, I don't think the countries are that big.
Oh, I thought that's pretty small.
Oh, 9 million is pretty. Holy crap. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's about the size of Ohio, I think.
Is it? Okay. I think I'm used to seeing it relative on a map.
Right.
With everything else. I was like,
It looks tiny. Yeah. I see that. I can see that.
Well, also, fun fact, in high school, I had the head coach for either geography or history. I don't know which one, because anytime I walked into class, he sent me and another guy to go work out, clean up the weight room, and paint the signs, the advertisement signs. So I have a very huge blind spot when it comes to that. It's that Fulton education working for you. Yeah, unlike your dad. It's like, I don't know. It's somewhere down. I looked it up. I was like, holy crap, it's surrounded. And I recognized everything. I was like, oh, yeah, El Salvador, Belize.
Well, my mom thought she was going to Africa when they told her Honduras. She had to look it up on the map. She's like,
God.
what do they do there?
Do you know what led her to get into the Peace Corps?
I don't know. She was definitely the black sheep of the family.
Okay.
I think she's the fourth of 5 kids.
Okay.
Her dad passed away when she was young, and she was in school, and I still don't know what it was that she just wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
And she wanted to go see something, so she left. She's always been very brave.
Okay.
I think that part of my ability to just pick up and go is having seen her do it so many times, like with 4 kids or to a place she didn't speak the language, and she just always made it work. And so for me, I'm used to seeing that.
Okay.
And then with my dad, it's always, if you're not doing something you love, then just quit, which was challenging as a kid because he was an adult and a parent and he was supposed to be taking care of things. But when he was unhappy, he was like, this is not working.
Yeah.
And so we'd move or we'd do something different. And I think that's those probably the 2 strongest things of I don't know, of my values that I believe that I can do anything that I set myself to, I set my mind to. And I also believe that when I'm not happy at something, I need to change it. So.
Yeah, that was something. My grandfather didn't talk much, and he was pretty rough and tough. Like, he was a guy that got into a lot of trouble, and then got sent off to World War II, fought in the Pacific, and came back a completely changed and upright citizen of the world. But he was still tough and mean, and not mean. He just looked mean. He looked mad all the time.
Yeah.
But I remember there was one point in college where I was talking to him about I was working at Taco Bell, not to brag. And I had an opportunity to go to Walmart because I wasn't getting treated right at Taco Bell.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was talking to him about it, and I never talked to him about it. And he was like, "Are you happy?" I was like, "No." It's like, life's too short to be unhappy. And then he went to the basement to work on keys or something. I was like, holy shit. Like that. And then, like, within a month, he passed away. So that... It's kind of drilled in, even though it was one little moment. It was the 1-2 punch. Yeah. I've had that at jobs where I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah, that happened to me when I was living in Austin. I was working a job at a pizza place. So I'd worked a nonprofit before, and then I went and I was tired of that, and I was like, I just want a job that I don't really have to think too much about, that I come in and I leave. And so I was working at a pizza shop, and they had a shift that lasted till like 3 a.m. on the weekends. And then you'd have to clean the place up, and it was like 5 o'clock before you got home. Oh, yeah. And I remember coming home from my very first shift. I was in training, like I just started. Yeah. And I was still in training, and I came home, and I, fell asleep at like 7 a.m. And in the afternoon, I call up my dad, like crying, and I'm just like, it was terrible. This isn't worth it. Yeah. He's like, Claudia, just quit. Like, why would you do that to yourself? You don't have a need for that. And I was like, well, I do need the money. And so I went back in training. I hadn't been there a week. And I go to my boss, and I'm like, look, I'm not going to do night shifts. You can give me other shifts, or you can fire me, but I'm just not going to do night shifts. And it was interesting because it's very much a party scene, and a lot of the people that worked at the company were musicians. So almost everyone would come into their shifts on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, hungover, not having slept. Yeah. On drugs, like whatever it was. It was a rough scene. And I was like the only person that was, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at like 9 a.m. And I was like, I was ready to work, right? Yeah. And so I told him, I was like, look, I will be your weekend person. I will be there at the morning shift. I am there. I'm awake. You need this. Yeah. And so they made it work for me. And it's kind of going back to, how do you do what you need to do or what makes you happy. Right. And I did love it. I got to talk to people all the time, hear people's stories. Yeah. It was a very nice, very laid back environment. And I didn't have to work that ridiculous shift that some people thought was awesome. And I just thought it was the worst thing in the world. But
I worked that shift. So when I worked at Taco Bell, it's even worse. I would work... Because I had to compact 39.9 hours of work in 4 days. So on like Saturdays, I would usually close and be there until 4 a.m. and then be back there at 8 a.m. to open at 10. To where I look back, I'm like, how was that legal? That doesn't seem legal.
The clopens, you close and you open.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. But it was same... They can never keep people. So it was always...
no kidding. Like, wow. Yeah. I was surprised.
Well, it was, and I still remember the best compliment one of the managers gave me is my first night I worked the front counter. And he said, you got off work at 8. I went out there to close the doors at midnight, and we didn't need to clean. That's how clean and stocked you did. I was like, I was bored. I was like...
I know. That also happened to me.
I was like, I just went and cleaned. And he was like, and you killed the dishes. I was like, I was bored.
I know. Like, how do I get out of here the fastest? By the time I left the place I was working at, like, everyone knew that if they wanted to leave early, they had to get me to start doing all the closing responsibilities of our shift. Because I feel like everywhere I go, I'm trying to streamline processes, right? Like, I want to make things more efficient. I want to make things faster. Right. And I was also super... detail oriented, which is interesting because it's not my job now. So my skill set I'm not using those, but like back in those days, it was like, FIFO, what's coming in, what's going out,
Oh, yeah.
are we stocked, like all these different things. And it was like,
Yeah.
I was in a way wanting more responsibility, even though I
Yeah.
didn't want them at the time. I was like, I can do more than this.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for the food industry. I don't miss it.
Yeah.
But I think that there are things you learn
Yeah.
in the food industry that I don't know if you ever learn anywhere else in life. It's
Speed and efficiency is what I think of.
speed and efficiency. There's also something about customer service. It helps you, I think it helps you treat other people better, right? And it's not that people aren't assholes all the time. They just don't realize what they're doing, I think.
Yeah.
And so I thought I knew when I used to work, I worked for like 10 years at my family restaurant. Oh, I had awakening when I went to work for this pizza shop because I wasn't the owner anymore. Yes, I was a waitress at my own place. Yes, I'd wash dishes. Yes, I'd close, but it was nothing like working this other job. And I think there's a lot to be said about, the service industry and how we go about that work and how we treat the people that are working in those spaces. Like, what is it? It's simple stuff, right? Like they put water on your table and you look them in the eyes to say thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Or
there's the GM there at Taco Bell. I still remember he said his idea. He's like, I think every high school kid should have to work in fast food.
We all think
or
that.
retail. Yeah, for at least 6 months. It's like it would completely change how this world ran.
I believe that.
You would respect people and be polite to people. And yeah, that's that was a weird thing to me later on of like getting to a point to where it's like, oh, you're sitting there figuring out tip and you're like, oh, 20%, it was good. And I was like, I'm going to throw one more dollar on there because one more dollar on there.
What that means to them
doesn't mean not to be calloused or like a dickhead, but
yeah, no, I realized that as well. Like I think I used to, I tipped less when I hadn't worked in the food industry in the States, and I think it was like, well, I'm poor, so I can't tip, or I'll give a little bit, right? And then I realized like, okay, there's a whole system issue here, and we should be paying people more, but also how do I contribute to their
I don't like Hooters.
Okay.
Because I feel like I've been playing poker with my dad and uncle since I was 8 years old. Mm-hmm. So that they built a Hooters next to my uncle's house, and all of a sudden we're going there every month before. I was like, God, okay. And I was going for a while. I was like, man, the service here sucks. I was like, I want to go, hey guys, still a restaurant. Still a restaurant. You still have to be polite, like not my dad and uncles. It was right. I was like, "Holy crap!"
The servers.
You're hurting my brain.
I've never been, so I don't know. But I was recently in last week in Boston. I went to a fancy Japanese restaurant, and I love eating. It's not ecologically friendly, but I love going into these fancy restaurants that fly fresh fish in.
Oh yeah.
3 times a week. So I go there and I like people explaining the menu to me, like the bouginess of it. Like, and this came from this place and this came from that place. And like, that's my favorite. Like, that's my favorite part. Or it's 50% of what I'm doing, right? I may be going into a diner that has just okay food, but if the service is really great and they're like babying me and it's like, oh, honey, do you need something else? I'm like, yes, please. Yeah. But I went to this place and I wanted more explanation on the menu because I really don't know too much about all these different fish, right? And the person that was there was just rushing me through it, and I ended up not getting what I wanted, and it has been weighing on me since a week ago. Yeah. Because it just pisses me off, right? Like I go into this place and I dropped $50 by myself. Yeah. And I didn't get exactly what I wanted because she didn't have the time to explain to me. Like I felt rushed and I felt pressured. And then I felt more mad at myself for not standing my ground. Yeah. And not asking more questions. And then, I tipped 20%. I'm like... Yeah.
I even though I think a combative thing is I've worked in the industry, so there have been times where I've literally left a dime for a tip.
And I almost wanted to look the person in the eye and go, "You were terrible.
You sucked."
You were terrible."
I wanted to. Actually, I was thinking of calling the chef because he was behind the line because they had a fixed menu that they were serving
okay.
other people, and then I didn't. I don't know.
Gotta let that one go. I know I'm the worst.
I
at
mean,
that
maybe, but I'm not doing a very good job at it yet. But of letting that one go. I'm not good at letting things go.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there's
Yeah.
an importance to that, and I think that also translates to the work I do.
Yeah.
I have more work to do, but we are a nonprofit and we do serve people.
Yeah.
And I want people to come here and feel like they have been helped.
Right.
And even if I don't have the answer for them, or even if their problem doesn't really have a solution,
Right.
that's what or a solution that they want it to be. I feel like I want people to feel like they've been heard, and I want
Yeah.
people to feel like they've been served.
Yeah. You're not just a checkbox on a form.
Yeah.
You actually mean something. You're, as stupid as it sounds, you're actually human.
Yeah, and it's difficult sometimes, right? Because we're overworked and
Yeah.
understaffed, and then you also get those people who are assholes,
Yeah.
right? And you're just like, I don't want to
Yeah.
help right now.
Yeah.
But then remembering why we're here is it's part of that customer service background.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to, we were talking about your dad telling you to just quit.
Yeah.
So I think that's good because it's instilling a confidence. I don't want to say a kid, but a young person. Because I think a lot of that is just not having the confidence in yourself or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you're still finding yourself. You're still working things out on who you are.
I guess it was, sometimes people will look at something from the outside and then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, for me, it was like I'm not a quitter.
Right.
Right. So like I do things till the end, and I'm not going to say my dad's a quitter, but
Yeah.
I think he stops
Step away.
sooner than I do.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, it was just an outside person just being like, well, just find something different. And
Yeah.
I had just moved there. I think I'd been in Austin for 2 months, and that was my second job because my first job as well was like, I loved it. It was this amazing plant nursery, but it was like 45 minutes in traffic to get there and then 45 minutes to get back. And I was
Yeah.
earning $7 an hour, and it was just
Yeah.
like, this is not worth it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I had started this pizza job, and I was just like, well, this is not ideal either.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be like moving
Right.
from thing to thing. But then I realized it ended up being a really great combo because I was I did my shifts there from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday,
Yeah.
and sometimes a Monday or something. And then I went and got another part-time job scooping ice cream. One was serving pizza, one was scooping ice cream for
God.
a gourmet company there. It was really great. It's the best ice cream I've ever had. And that one worked out. It was very reasonable hours. You're never out
Yeah.
before, after 11 or something. And so I made the two really work well for me.
Yeah.
And so I think it's also the idea of being creative. Like, what did I need, right?
Yeah.
And then how many hours do I need? And how many
Yeah.
hours do I need to live well? And I mean, I was not building an empire for myself at the time, neither,
Pizza
and I'm
and ice
certainly
cream.
not building an empire at a nonprofit for myself. But I really enjoyed a time in my life where I didn't have responsibilities.
Right.
Right. Like, I mean, I had them.
Right.
I was single. I was paying my bills. I was working my job. I would show up, but I didn't have more.
Right.
I didn't have anything to take home with me for work.
Yeah.
And I just, when I left, and I went and I had a really great time. And I think it was a time in my life where I don't know if you have many of these in your life, or at least I haven't created very many for myself in my life, where I just was living for myself.
Right.
And it was a really great experience. And when it was done, I was ready for it to be done.
Yeah.
And I was ready to take on more responsibility and grow and learn. But I think I learned a lot about myself in that year.
Yeah.
I did a lot of things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And I think of it now where I work so many hours and I'm obsessed with what I do. And I'm thinking about work when I'm not at work. And I don't have as much balance as I did when I was there, right?
Right.
I call those sabbatical years because you're doing something that's completely outside of, your regular work. And I've done, actually, when I say I haven't done venue management in my life, I've probably done more than a lot of people. I've had 3 sabbaticals in my life. I had one right out of high school.
Okay.
Because I didn't know what I wanted to go to college for. And my parents were like, just take a year off, figure it out. And I didn't want to work in the restaurant. So I went and got a job at a hotel around the corner. And I was a receptionist. And in the first week, I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
This sucks. Because you do nothing.
Yeah.
Like, you're just sitting there at the front desk. Like, I can't. So I lasted like 3 months, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
And then I went to go work for my parents. And then I was like, there's no reasoning around this. But I remember being at this hotel. I was, 19, 18. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go for business management because I want to run my own business. I don't want to work for somebody else.
Right.
Because even in my own restaurant, I was still, it was mine, right? In a way, it was mine. And so that was my reasoning. That's how I chose my career, which is not the best thought out, rationale, but it worked. My university was 2 blocks from my house. It was not a great university, but I also feel like common sense takes you a really long way, and life experience takes you a long way. So I've been very lucky in my career. I mean, it wasn't a terrible university, but it wasn't a great university.
Which one was it?
It's called the Catholic University of Honduras.
Okay.
And I mean, it's an international. It's not a chain, but it's an international family of universities.
Okay.
Some are better than others. It wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
It turned out fine for me, but my first sabbatical was before starting college. And then I had a lot of challenges in school because when I was going for business, everything I was learning in school, I was taking back to my life, right? Which most college kids in Honduras weren't doing because most kids don't study and work. You go to college, you finish college, and then you work because it's more affordable there. So working and studying is not as common.
Okay.
So I would just bring it back home and I was like, this is not practical. This is not, and then I'd go back to my teachers and I'd question them, right? And none of them had ever owned businesses. And I was a pain in the ass. I was terrible. I was an overachiever too. But I would bring back all this stuff and I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense or this doesn't look right. And so after I'd finished all my classes, I took 3.5 years to finish my degree. It was a 4-year degree in business administration. So after that, I had out of nowhere. So the sabbatical year I took after high school.
Okay.
I went and did a 9-month program where I'd travel once a month to the capital. It was terrible. I had to get onto one of these rickety old buses once a month, and it would take 8 hours to get there. But I was part of a program run by a German nonprofit that did like civic engagement for young people.
Okay.
And so
were you one of the youngest people in there, or was it a lot of kids?
No. It was mostly people I was 18 at the time. Most people were in their mid-20s.
Okay.
Late 20s.
Okay.
In the program, but we did a lot of civic participation education, It was an awesome program. So during that year that I wasn't studying, when I was working at the restaurant and I was working at this hotel, I was also going through this program, which was awesome. And so the reason I had to go back to that is when I finished my college years, the executive director of that nonprofit was German, and she had just come back from Germany from visiting her family, and she said, Claudia, there's this eco-village in Germany, and they have volunteers there, and you should apply to go. And I was like, okay. So I had finished my schooling, and I applied for this I guess internship scholarship, and it was to live in the eco village for a year with everything paid for by the government, the German government. Wow. It's kind of like the Peace. It's kind of like Vistas in the States. That's what the equivalent is. And so I told some white lies. They're like, do you speak German? I was like, no, but I'm learning. Yeah. And I wrote my essays in Spanish, and then this lady was married to a Honduran guy who spoke broken German, so he translated them for me. God. And I was like, well, I'm learning, but honestly, like, there wasn't an opportunity to learn German in my community, right? So, like, where was I going to learn? Yeah. So I write all this stuff, and I'll be damned. In August of 2008, I get the letter that says, September, I think 15th, you're expected in the eco village in Germany. And I was like, uh-oh.
Had you told your parents?
Oh yeah, my parents,
okay.
they knew, and they were just like, go, and I was
In the movie version of this, they had no idea. You're just
in the movie version. They
you
might
had
have had no idea,
yeah,
but
you
no,
had
my
the
parents,
backpack.
my parents were all excited about it because they're like, this is an incredible opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And then my classmates, because we were about to graduate, right, we had to do our like a thesis, and then.
Yeah.
And I hadn't started my thesis because I had just finished classes. And my classmates were like, Claudia, don't go. Like,
Yeah.
what about your classes? What about the thesis? What about graduating? And I was like, this is a once in a lifetime
Yeah.
opportunity. The university is going to be here when I get
Yeah.
back.
Oh, yeah.
So that was my second sabbatical.
Okay.
And I spent one of the best years of my life, in a year and a half of my life, in Germany, in the middle of nowhere on the border of East and West Germany.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they gave me like €350 a month to live. And I lived fine on that. There was nothing to spend on. There was nowhere to go.
And they
so-
provided lodging and everything?
lodging and
Okay.
food and everything.
Okay.
And so I was there, and I think recently I've been really thinking more about the privilege and the blessings I've had in my life of all these random events that have happened. And I was just like, why did I apply to that? Like, I could have just like missed a deadline or not done
Yeah.
it. And I was just like, I showed up in Germany. I showed up in Germany with 2 suitcases worth of shit that like I never used while I was there.
Oh, my God.
Like makeup. This is an eco village, so think really hippie, right?
Okay.
Like people will want to think like nudists and like people smoking pot and drinking all the time, and that's really what it was not.
Yeah.
Because it was a very serious eco village that was doing a social experiment on how to live, reducing your ecological footprint. So these were
Okay.
very serious Germans, right? Like the young people kind of got wild now and then, but the community as a whole was very serious.
Okay.
And there were 120 people living in this area together. It was about 140 acres, but like 40 acres worth of like flat lands.
Lord. Oh,
and then the rest was like
Yeah.
forest around it. And so I went there to live in a community. So it was built in neighborhoods. So a lot of communes in the States are built around like religious people. Actually, in the
Yeah.
world, they are. This was not. This was built
Okay.
around like different neighborhoods. So there was one neighborhood of women raising their kids together. Like
Yeah.
they didn't have husbands, or they were single moms. So they had their own little neighborhood.
Okay.
There was a neighborhood of people that were like the extremist, reducing their ecological footprint. So like they built an entire house of all recycled material, and the only waste product was like a square foot of like trash. That was all they
Wow.
used in the entire thing. There were just all sorts of different groups, and the neighborhood I became a part of was a multi-generational experiment, because
Okay.
in Germany people don't live in multi-generational settings anymore, which is interesting because I came from that, right? My grandma lives next
Yeah.
door. My
Yeah.
my extended family was somewhat nearby, so for
Yeah.
me it was a perfect fit. And it was there were 3 older people in their 70s and 80s in my community neighborhood. There were 3 families in their 30s with kids, and all the kids were kind of the same age. And I was that 20-something, year old
Right.
that was in the link. So I did a lot of self-exploration in a way, like figuring out what things made me happy, and pushing my beliefs, I think. So for example, I remember showing up there. The day I arrived, someone had to pick me up in Berlin. All I knew was the guy's name was Peter, and he was wearing an orange and black jacket. Like, I don't remember. I think maybe I had his phone number. My plane was 2 hours late from Heathrow. And so it was 2:00 in the morning, and I'll be damned.
There was Peter.
There was Peter, some old guy in his like 70s, right?
Oh, my God.
And he takes me to his apartment
Yeah.
in Berlin. I sleep on the couch. The next day, he puts me on a train. And he's like, 2 stops from here, Lilith is going to pick you up. And there was this old lady, crazy, who two stops down was waiting for me, right? Like it was 2 hours away, but like 2
Yeah.
stops down was waiting for me. I'd never been on a train before. I didn't speak a word of German. They didn't
Yeah.
speak very much English, and as far as I know. And then she was there. She picked me up from the bus station in Salzwedel, and we took a bus back to the eco village. And I remember showing up at this place, and they had like leftovers for me because it was way past my everyone's dinner time there. And I was just like, who the fuck lives like this? And I started weeping. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah.
And, you know, thinking back now, like at that time I'd lived in Honduras, so I was very trustworthy. Like looking back and now living in the States where people are always, I feel, thinking of like the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah.
I think back and I was like, I could have been, like, this could have been a scheme.
Yeah.
I could have been trafficked for all we know, right? And I think of it now and I'm just like, thank God I don't live my life that way
Yeah.
because I would miss out on so many opportunities, right? And so looking back, it's kind of crazy, but I would do it over again a million times. And if I had a child that wanted to do something like this, I would again encourage them.
Okay.
So I lived there for a year and a half, and
Was it people from all over? Or
No,
with the
mostly
families,
Germans.
Germans. Okay.
mostly Germans. There were international people came through a lot because
Okay.
it's one of the most well-run eco-villages in Europe and I would say probably in the world. Like they just
Okay.
do things really well. Conflict resolution, purchasing food, the rules that
Okay.
they live their
Okay.
society in is very interesting. So yeah, it was. I think before that, there were a lot of things that I was trying to not be
Yeah.
because it wasn't maybe what I wanted to identify with. But when I got there, I was like, oh, this is in my blood. Like, I can't help
Yeah.
this. Like, it's simple things. Like, when I grew up very poor, so my family was, used secondhand, and
Yeah.
that wasn't cool in Honduras, right? Like, that wasn't a thing. And then when I lived in Germany, the eco village, no one cared about your style. Like, we all used. There's someone there.
Yeah.
Can they come in? Hello? Nice, give a second. So when I was living there, I realized, I guess I just realized what things mattered and what things didn't matter to me.
Right.
I mean, I'm still learning more and more of that, but I think that was my first place where I
Okay.
figured, when I started, there was a place called the Verschenke-Ecke, I think. It's called the Giving Corner. So you
Okay.
go in there and there's just like all sorts of free stuff. And so like I'd go there and just get clothes to wear, right? And I had bought all these I had a friend come to the States and I'd bought all this clothes and I had
Oh
these
my God.
jeans and I had like all this nice stuff. And I was literally living on a farm
Yeah.
for a year, right?
Yeah.
And my job was gardening and cooking and taking care of kids sometimes, which was not my favorite part of it all. But it was just a lot of like running barefoot. It was an incredible
Yeah.
bubble of time. And so I realized that, I do care about local, and I really, really care about community, and I want to build spaces where people find belonging.
Right.
And I realized that I really didn't care what people thought about what I was wearing necessarily, and a lot of that was from my parents. Like my parents didn't care, but I was like, oh, they're so uncool, right? This is so like, don't even talk to me. Because I was in my
Yeah.
teens, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
When I thought that about them. And then I grew, and then I was in Germany. I was like, my parents were just ahead of times. Like they
Yeah.
were just cool. And so I really embraced more of my my roots, I think.
Okay.
And so that was my second sabbatical. And then my third was the year I was in Austin.
Okay.
I had a different job in my second year in Austin. It was more demanding, but my first year.
What led you to Austin?
So my timeline is all scattered. So I was born in Honduras. At 5, we moved to the States.
Okay.
At 11, we moved from Nebraska back down to Honduras.
Okay.
I did all of my high school and my college in Honduras. So then
Okay.
I went to Germany.
Okay.
Then I came back to Honduras to run my family restaurant. And I was really bored. Like I'd just been in this like totally different place, right?
Right.
And I was honestly, I'd also realized how safe it was to be a woman in Germany and how dangerous it was to be a woman in Honduras.
Okay.
And so I didn't want to live like that anymore.
Right.
And so I'd been volunteering for like 10 years for a nonprofit, and I would translate for the medical brigades that would come. And they offered me a job as their operations manager in the States. And so I took that job in 2011.
Yeah.
I moved to Ohio in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, the States, it's all the same, right? I didn't know any better.
Oh my God.
I didn't know any better.
I know.
I mean, I'd lived in Nebraska, rural Nebraska before, and then I went to rural Ohio. And I'll tell you, it was one of the best times. Every time of my life has been a best time of my life. The people were incredible. I'd known so many people in the community for years. So I really came to the States with a family and like a social network to
Yeah.
take care of me when I needed to learn about
Yeah.
living in the States. So I was there for 3 years. That's where I met my partner. And
Northern, where in Ohio?
south of Cleveland, an hour.
Oh, okay. Like Akron.
Akron, south of
Yeah.
Akron.
Yeah.
And a
I know.
little-
I know. There's a design conference that happened in Cleveland every year. So I would drive up.
Oh, that's a long
and
drive.
I've got friends in Cincy, Columbus, and Cleveland. So I know the state a little bit more than I did 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the cold was too much for me there.
Yeah.
I wanted something different. And I tell the story, poor Nathan. So he broke up with me. And he wanted to go do different things in the world. And he'd come back. So he came to Ohio. Neither of us are from Ohio. I came to Ohio for my job with the nonprofit. And he came to Ohio for a job right after the Peace Corps because he had come back from Morocco. And the job he got was
okay
in northeastern Ohio.
Yeah.
So that's where we met. And we dated for about a year. And he wanted to do other things in life. And so he broke up with me. Fool. And he moved to DC and he did international development and he did all sorts of stuff. And he said, you should move to Austin. You think you'd like it there. I've been there before. And I didn't know any better. And
Yeah.
I was like, I trusted him. He's still my friend. So I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm going to do that. So
Yeah.
I packed my Ford Focus wagon, 2002,
Nice.
with everything that would fit. And I moved to Texas. I didn't know anyone there. I got a couch surfer. I looked on couch surfing and I was like, like there was guys trying to hit on me and like, oh, stay at my place. And I changed my description. I'm like, look, I'm moving here for serious. And I need a room to myself because I'm trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because a girl answered my couch surfing request and she says, we have an Airstreamer in the back and you can stay there as long as you need to figure this
God.
out.
That's amazing.
This is the weird part. And she really identified. She was like, I know what it's like. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
She goes to Burning Man with a guy that I hosted in Honduras couch surfing years before. This dude now lives in Atlanta, but at the time, I think he lived in San Francisco or something. But I knew, so the reason we Facebook friended, and then we had this person in common, Mark, and I was like, how do you know this person? Because
Yeah.
he had stayed at my house in Honduras
Yeah.
randomly.
Yeah.
And we had a wonderful time, and he'd eaten at our restaurant. We'd taken him all over in the area to visit places, and she was like, we go to Burning Man together. So it was like one of those weird experiences.
I think that's a weird thing about being born and raised here. I'm so used to that when it happens other places. Like I was sitting, where was I? I was sitting in Chicago. I went to a cigars, and I went outside and I sat down and a guy said, he was like, where are you from? I was like, well, Tennessee.
¿Qué pasó?
Oh.
Go ahead.
It's like, where are you from? I was like, Tennessee. And I was like, he was like, oh, cool. He's like, I got, which part of Tennessee? I was like, well, East Tennessee, Knoxville. And he was like, I have a cousin that owns a landscaping business. And I was like, is it Deirdre? And he was like, how the hell? It's like, well, you're a black man. And she's a black woman who owns a landscape. She's the one. And I met her a week ago. And the whole time he's like, I can't believe. I was like, dude, I'm so inured to this, or however you use that word. It's fine. It's fine. It's whatever. I matched up with a girl on a dating app. As we were chatting, we ended up at the same show in Asheville together, to where the lead singer made a big deal about how big I was and tried to hire me as a security. And she was like, I can't get over it that you were there at that show. I was like, the world is very small.
Yeah.
The world is so small. Like
The world is small. I do like that. And I think
Yeah.
that was that's
That
how I
is
ended
funny.
that's how I ended up in Austin though.
So
he
you were
told
there
me-
right as it was kind of
Yeah.
burgeoning.
It was a lot, and it was
Yeah.
too much. And so 3 years in, my partner was like, DC makes me unhappy. I was wrong and I love you. And I was like, I know. And he
Oh my
said,
God, you're quoting Han Solo. I know.
Oh,
Do
really?
you know that from Star Wars?
No, I don't.
Where Princess
Don't tell
Leia's-
anyone. I've never watched
Oh, no,
it.
That's fine. I don't like those movies that much, but that's a big thing in those is Princess Leia says, I love you. And he says, I know.
What an asshole.
That's the whole point. That's why she loves him.
So I was
Yeah.
like, I know. But
Yeah.
he's like, I want to move. And so he moved to Austin, and we lived there for a year. And
In the Airstream.
no,
I'm just kidding. I'm just
God,
kidding.
no. I could not do that. So yeah, and that's how I ended up in Austin. It was random.
Oh my God. Okay. So what was, in all your kind of traversing the states, did you kind of constantly go back home and see your folks? Or
I go back about twice. Well, when I was in Texas, it was cheaper.
Yeah.
So I'd go back twice or 3 times a year. It was like $200 flights.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in Ohio, I'd go back for my work. So I'd usually go 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
Here, it's way more expensive. I spend about $1,000 a flight. So I usually go by once a year, probably.
How far, in relation to the country, were your parents? Were they on the south side, the north
So
side?
my parents are on the far west, near the border to Guatemala in Santa Rosa de Copan.
Okay.
And near the border of Guatemala, near the border of El Salvador. But my grandma, who used to live where they live, now lives in Tegucigalpa, which is on the other side of the country. It's the capital. It's more the center of the country. And so I have to fly into Tegus, which is the second most dangerous landing strip in the world.
Good Lord.
So it's more expensive to fly in.
Well, I was asking because I know because I looked it up, where Belize is in relation.
Yeah.
And I know friends who travel there once a year because they get deals on Scott's cheap flights for like $300.
I actually have subscribed to Scott's cheap flights, but Tegucigalpa's not on their list of places to go. But
I was trying to figure out, like, well, if it's Belize, maybe it's quick and...
Well, and I've come to the point in my life where do I spend 2 days traveling to make a flight cheaper, or do I spend that time with my grandmother because, like, it's my time, right? So, like, which one's more valuable? When I was younger, I would do the, like, crazy sleep overnight in one place and then drive to another airport the next day. I don't do that anymore. So it's a door to door. From Knoxville to Tegucigalpa, I leave here at about 7 a.m. I'm there at noon.
Holy crap.
It's not a bad flight.
Okay.
I stop in Atlanta. So, yeah.
And where are your relatives? Where are your...
In Tegus. My aunts and my grandma live in Tegucigalpa.
Oh, your siblings.
Oh, they're all over the place.
Okay.
I have a sister who's a chef in Philly.
Okay.
I have a sister who works at an organic supermarket in Germany, south of Frankfurt. I have a brother in St. Louis, and I have a little brother in Honduras who is a baker and has started managing the restaurant with my parents.
Okay. They really are.
We're all over.
How did she end up in Germany?
After me.
Okay, so
I went, and then I told her, you need to apply to this. And the community I lived with loved me, and they're like, oh, let's have her sister. So and she
and then she ruined all your good reputation.
No, but we definitely had very different approaches. I'm like an old lady. I loved hanging out with like the grown-ups, and she loved hanging out with like the teens, and did a lot of partying and stuff. But she went back and she did her au pair, a couple of years of au pair, and then she got a degree in Germany.
Wow.
And so she's a German citizen now. She's been there for 10 years, 11 years.
Are there any time that you are all back together again, or is
not
it too
really?
hard
It's usually one-on-one, or we'll visit Honduras, and one or two of us will be there, but never all of us together.
One big.
No.
You said St. Louis, Philly, Germany, Honduras. Wow. Okay. Chef in Philly, though, I might need that information because if I head up to Philly, I gotta go up there to see baseball sometimes. So whenever I do, I'll be like, all right, where am I going?
Well, she definitely knows the places to be and to go. She worked for I think right now she's at a startup company, but yeah, she loves what she does.
Let's see what else I got. Is tourism an industry in Honduras?
It is. It's not as much lately because of the political instability and the insecurity. But it was. I mean, the Bay Islands are part of Honduras.
Well, I was thinking of like some
Mayan ruins are close to my family's home.
Surrounded it. I was like, well, this seems like it would be. Or that's why I was wondering when you mentioned working at the hotel. I was like, oh my God, how many people from other countries?
I don't even remember, honestly. I wasn't there long enough. People traveled there from all over, but the brigades would work there that I worked with later. My town isn't a touristic town. It's an economic place. You don't go there for visiting. You go there because you're doing business of some sort. And so Copan Ruinas is nearby. They're the Mayan ruins. Then you go, to the north, and there's beaches. But I'm not from a town where you do tourism or producing stuff. There's coffee in the area.
Did your folks' restaurant really stand out? Like, were there a lot in that because it was business, or was it
Ours
more
was the first farm to table. We didn't
Okay.
even know it was farm to table. I think my mom was just, looking for better ingredients and fresher foods when we were opening our restaurant. And there was a pizza shop, but they'd been there forever and it was really crappy.
Yeah.
And they just didn't try very hard, is my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, they
Yeah.
closed. They went out of business a couple of years after, but I think they were on that trajectory before we opened up our
Okay.
place. It was the only only pizza shop for a really long time, and a couple of other places have opened and closed and opened again. Pizza Hut's now in my hometown, but our customers are really specific. I think we have an incredible menu, and so.
Since it's farm to table, is there anything of course there's going to be unique, but is there anything completely out of left field that is on the
I would say, since my sister and I, the one that's a chef,
Yeah.
left, my parents kind of started doing whatever they wanted. So it's like, for a while my dad was raising sheep, so he started offering plates of food with lamb, and it had nothing to do. We're a pizza and sandwich shop. But he was like, this is what I want to do.
my
So
God.
he started making a lamb dish that was like a slow roasted lamb and potatoes, and people loved it. And then it was. And then he also did a pasta with lamb that was incredible.
Yeah.
I know those were two of the things that they decided to do that were like really out there. But generally speaking, we make everything from scratch. So our
Right.
sauce is very unique. It has it's all fresh tomatoes, and
Okay.
there's a little bit of tomato paste, but there's also cilantro and onions. And it's like cilantro's not a thing you would usually use in pizza sauce anyplace
Yeah.
else. But it's a really, really good pizza. And my favorite, I mean, there were a lot of favorites for me, but I love anchovies, which is something most people are like, ugh.
I'm out.
I'm obsessed.
You can have all
I am
of them.
obsessed with anchovies. I love them. So I loved our anchovy pizza.
Good Lord, how are you not 500 pounds? Like, that's all. You talk about pizza and ice cream at one point. I was like, good God.
Well,
okay.
it didn't make me feel great when I eat that every day. But yeah. What else do we have? We have a really great. So my mom had we had come from the States to Honduras to a place where, there wasn't internet yet at the time when we moved. And so it was that idea of bringing some part of the world with you. And so when we opened our pizza shop, we started serving some sandwiches as well. And people had never tried roast beef in this town. And there was this other sandwich we had out of this book that was called the Golden Gate Grill was the sandwich. And my mom was like, we're going to make this.
Okay.
And it's a savory French toast per se. So you have like a butter garlic sauce
Okay.
that you grill your Parmesan bread,
Okay.
and then like you add ham and tomatoes and red onions and cheddar cheese and cilantro, and it's incredible. And avocado, it's amazing. She definitely made a twist that wasn't in the Golden Gate Grill or whatever it was called. But anyway, we were making this menu, and she couldn't remember the name of the sandwich. So she called it a San Francisco Melt instead of a Golden Gate Grill. And thank God she did, because Golden Gate Grill would be a very complicated word for people to say in Spanish.
Okay.
Like, that would have been terrible. So now everyone's like San Francisco. San Francisco's easy in Spanish or in English. So that's one of the kind of funny stories about some of the products we have. And she sells some baked goods. So she makes sourdoughs, and she makes croissants, and she makes cinnamon rolls, which are things that people aren't used to in the area, right? And so, I mean, now they are. She's been there for 20 years doing this, but in the beginning it was very nuanced. So,
is there any thought? Have they thought about retiring and handing this off? Well, you said to your brother.
I mean, he just recently got into it. None of the rest of us really. It's interesting. I mean, we didn't really want it.
Yeah.
I think it was, family-owned stuff is complicated,
Right?
Because running a family business where everyone's like a whole bunch of strong-headed women, because that was my mom and my three sisters and me, it was definitely a challenge. And then implementing new things, and everyone's a boss, right? Like, so the structure was just going back now. I think it would be much easier to say, this is going to be your role, and this is going to be my role, and this is how we do it. But when we didn't have any business background at the time, my family was just like, we're going to do this. why would they retire? They have a pretty easy job. Like they come in, they oversee the employees that are doing the work. Like they're not the ones making the stuff. They're going to the market to buy ingredients, going to San Pedro to buy stuff you can't buy in our hometown, and
coming up with new menu items. Or
I hope
like
not.
That.
They should just stick to what they do and some consistency, right? Like my pet peeve with restaurants is I want to go back and taste the exact same flavor every time. Oh man! Right? If you're making me whatever it is you're making me, I want it to taste the same every time.
Okay.
And so
my favorite place here, Jackie's Dream. There's 3 levels of heat to that hot chicken, and it's never. God love George, but it's never consistent. And there have been times where I've gotten the lowest heat and I couldn't breathe. And there's times I got the hottest heat, and I was like, "Come on, man! I need some hot sauce."
It's definitely a challenge. People would be like, "Oh, what's so hard about it?" But it's humans, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what's keeping consistency. So unless you have systems in place to ensure that, it's definitely a challenge. So honestly, Knoxville needs a weekend's pizza, right? That restaurant would do well anywhere, but I'm not. It's not my line of work anymore.
Right.
I think I loved being a hub, right? Like Weekends Pizza was a hub. It was like this place your friends would meet. Anyone that was in town, that's the place they would go. But I've kind of built that with Centro Hispano. This is a central meeting point. I feel like I've built in that community that I wanted. But I don't miss not having lunch because things get busy. I don't miss the stress of bottleneck times I don't miss the upset client because something wasn't what they wanted it to be. Yeah. You trade one thing for another.
I see that with a lot of friends. Like one of my friends owns a burger shop here, but he also offers breakfast and stuff. And he made this omelet that was, I think it's like 4 pounds or something. It's named after a guy. There's a guy who's a bouncer at a bar who was like, can you make, and he essentially made it. And it was like 4 pounds because the guy is my size. And so he made it. And that guy's joke is, I can't even finish that damn thing. He was
oh my gosh.
But some guy saw it because that guy was in there. He's like, I want one of those. The guy took 2 bites and then sent it back. So that was like 4 pounds worth of materials. And and the owner was pretty pissed because he was like, he didn't really try it. It was this laundry list of, I was like, why'd you make me make this big ass thing? Like, it was just this whole thing. He's like, but you can't say anything because, they'll torch you online or something nowadays. But yeah, food is, I enjoy eating. I could never imagine. I'll do the design work. I'll make the menu pretty. I'm happy to do that. Mm-hmm. Since you talked, was there anything harder to grow or anything that they had to figure out workarounds on that? Like you said, tomatoes. Like, I don't mean like tomatoes, but were there almost like necessity being like, well, we're going to use a lot of cilantro because we can grow it? Or was it that more of a palate thing?
I mean,
does that make sense?
It took us a long time to decide what our sauce was going to taste like or what something was going to be. I think the challenge sometimes is, do we have good tomatoes right now? Or is this the season we don't have great tomatoes? Or some of the other things about challenging, I guess, of running a restaurant in Honduras is sometimes things just run out and you just cannot find it. So, like, what does it look like to not have pepperoni at the distributor for the next 6, days? 5 weeks, like ridiculous stuff. So you learn to stock a lot of things. And it's interesting, here in the States, my partner is like, Claudia, why did you buy 3 boxes of butter? Like, the supermarket's a mile away. And I'm just, a lot of times I'm just not even thinking. And I'm like, in Honduras, you run out of butter. I mean, we're not starving, right? Like, okay, there's no imported American butter, but I needed it for the restaurant and it had to be there. Yeah. So I was just used to going and buying 5, of something. Yeah. And so I still have a lot of that here because sometimes it was hard to find a cheese, right? Like you needed mozzarella and quesillo, which is a type of local cheese in Honduras. And we needed those. And then suddenly the provider was like, we don't have that this week. What do you mean? I run a business on this. I can't not have it. So,
Yeah. You know, we order this amount.
yeah,
every time.
Why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
Like, so that's one of the challenges in
Okay.
running a business, I think, in Honduras. I mean, there's a political situation, right? Like, there was a month and a half where roads were closed and there were fuel protests or something. And there was like people stranded on the side of the road because they'd run out of gas,
Yeah.
How do you get to San Pedro to buy the ingredients you need for your restaurant or whatever
Yeah.
it would be? So there are differences in that. I think I don't even know how easy it would be to like just find the ingredients I
Yeah.
needed here, right? Just
Yeah.
arrive. But we still go to the market, 3-4 times a week to buy the ingredients. It's a big commercial market, so it's like a
Okay.
wholesale market.
Okay.
And so we go there and buy the sacks of tomatoes, sacks of onions, and all the other stuff they need,
Okay.
There's parts of that I miss. There's parts of that I enjoyed.
But you can do it just on your own micro level now. It's like, I went to the farmer's market. And
I went to the farmer's market and bought 100 pounds of tomatoes.
I saw that a lot in my grandmother because she grew up in like the teens and the 20s, to where she would scour like the circulars to be like, oh, butter's on sale.
Yeah.
So I'm going to buy a box of butter.
Well,
So-
I usually don't buy what's on sale, but
well, for her, it was always like, because she grew up like extreme poverty in East Kentucky, to where
Yeah.
she had TB. I think she was quarantined for like 6 weeks when she was like, she almost died. Like I think it's when I run into people, I also think about the bigger picture of like, I probably could not have been here
yeah.
like that. Like it happened with my grandmother, it happened with my dad, to where his two brothers fought in the worst hell of Vietnam. And then my grandmother's like, you're not taking all my boys. So she and her pastor wrote to Congress and to John Duncan Sr. and said, you need to figure this out because you're not taking all three
The
of
other
us.
ones die.
No, but one of them, do you know Tet of 68, the big attack? It was this where it essentially got leveled. My uncle was there and transferred like a week before that happened. So he could have died. Like, and the two of
would have
them
died.
told me later all the firefights, and one of them, he was in the Air Force. And when they would land on the airstrip, when you said that about the most dangerous, I thought back to my uncle's story about they landed and the pilot said, I'm going to open the back hatch. You need to just start running. And it was because they were in the valley and snipers would try and take them out. So it literally, the plane just turned and took off, threw the mail out the side window and took off. And so my uncle and his best friend would drag out chairs and have a beer and cigarettes and watch the snipers try to take out the planes. Yeah. It was pretty. So my dad ended up serving in Korea as a chaplain's assistant instead. But it's the same thing. It's like, well, if she hadn't done that, I could not be here. He could have served in some hairy shit. Anyway.
That went on a tangent.
Yeah, rambling, man. So you're in Austin. Your partner finally wisens up and tells you he
And I said, I know.
I know. And so where did you all go from there?
Knoxville.
Oh, Knoxville was it. Okay, there was not an in-between.
There was not an in-between.
Oh, my God. Okay.
And here we are.
Because there's water in Knoxville.
Well, that wasn't our reasoning.
I know.
But that was definitely my dad's
Yeah, there was water.
approval of the place.
And it's been in less than 3.5, 4 years?
3.5 years, 4 in July.
Okay. I listened back to the other podcast. So it was 2.5 at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just started.
And it still feels like home.
Feels more like home than it did 2.5 years ago. I'd be surprised at what I said back then. I think I found, I don't know what I found. I was still missing Texas a lot, and there were parts of Tennessee that I still wasn't, my heart wasn't here.
Right.
And about a year ago, we bought a house in South Knoxville on a dead-end road with a whole bunch of old community activists. And they're legends, and they're just incredible people. And I found my community.
Yeah.
So I had my community at work, but I didn't have my community at home
Right.
when we were living in the other part of South Knoxville. And now I think I arrived. It's like I feel the community I used to feel when I lived in Honduras, where my
Okay.
grandma was a block away and her neighbors were there. And if I needed something, they were there for me. And if they needed something, I was there. And it's like, that's what I have now. And so
Yeah.
if we go out of town, Polly feeds my cat and comes over and pets her or
Yeah.
waters my plants. And then
Checks
when
for
they're out of
packages on the front porch. Yeah.
And then when they're out of town, we go over and feed the chickens and make sure there aren't snakes in the nests or whatever it is,
This doesn't seem like an equal trade. No.
No, they give us eggs too.
Oh, no, when? Never mind.
When the snakes don't eat them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I feel like my heart arrived.
Okay.
And I've been really blessed here. I feel like when I finally decided to not be splitting myself about where I could be and where I was and just
Yeah.
decide to live, which is interesting because I'm an all or nothing person. So it took me a while this time around when
Yeah.
I'm usually like from the get-go, right? I decided that I could either be, sad or
Yeah.
I could make the best of where I am and take advantage of all the opportunities I was getting and help other people go and find those opportunities as
Yeah.
well, right? And so that's what I've been doing. I've always loved the job. It's been hard.
Yeah.
It's been the hardest fucking thing I've done in my life.
Yeah.
But it is the most rewarding
Yeah.
by far. And I just realized that I really have a lot of privilege and I want to use that to help other people have opportunities. So I'm happy with my home. I'm happy
Yeah.
with my job. I'm happy with Knoxville. I get to travel when I want to travel. I get
Yeah.
to visit my family. And I think those are the important things. I eat well. I have everything I need.
Right.
I'm not
Right.
going to be a millionaire with the work I do, but I make a living for myself and I
you help others.
help others. And
Yeah.
and I think that we say, giving back is a big deal. And I don't really believe in giving back. I kind of believe in giving forward.
Okay.
So for me, it's not maybe, I got this, so therefore I'm going to do that.
Right.
It's more of, I have all of that. I have such plenty in my life, if that's even a way of using that, but I have so much in my life. I feel like the more you give, it multiplies, right?
Yeah.
And I also really believe in, I don't know, there a lot of people have helped me along the way in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that we need to pay back exactly the person that gave us something. So you give me something
Yeah.
and I need to know how to receive that gracefully
Yeah.
and with gratitude and know that you're not the person necessarily that needs to receive from me.
Okay.
It's a network of giving, right? And so
Right.
I think that's been something that we've really worked with here at Centro. Some, people support the work we do here and then we give it to someone else and
Right.
those people then
Right.
use it somewhere else. And it's so cool.
I get that because there's a lot of times where, like, let's say I'm at a coffee shop and my friend is like, "Oh, I don't have." I was like, "I got you. Don't give it back to me. Give
it to somebody else.
This is going to come up for you later. You get them."
Yeah.
I was like, "I'm good."
And I think the world really does revolve around those good
Yeah.
deeds that were not, not a give and take
Yeah.
in that one interaction, but it's this bigger picture of giving and taking in the universe.
I believe in the adage of be more humble. That's my big thing.
Yeah.
Is you can have confidence, but I don't know. That's a harder thing. Like when I see athletes going into a toy store and just everything that people have in layaway, just paying for everything. It's like, okay, that dude realized he's just part of a community.
Yeah.
He just wanted to do something nice, so he went in there and did it.
Yeah.
It's like that's being more humble to me. It's just, just realize you're part of a bigger community.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right, that's it. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. This has been fun. Anytime I can think back on the crazy shit I've done, I'm like, thank you.